If you grew up in the early 2000s, you might remember an animated series that aired on Cartoon Network that depicted the adventures of three boys named Ed, Ed, and Eddy. They lived in a cul-de-sac, constantly getting into trouble with the other kids in their never-ending quest for a sweet and sugary jawbreaker. The cast of characters was diverse, and the themes covered were always lighthearted. But when looking back at the show, a few eyebrows may be raised. As the fans grew older, they started asking, why are there no adults in the series? Why are their tongues a different color? And above all, why do they never leave the cul-de-sac for good? This is when the purgatory theory was born, the idea that we were witnessing children being stuck in between worlds. It may sound ludicrous at first, but digging a little deeper reveals a lot more than you'd think. Being too young to be sent to heaven or hell, only the kids were sent to this purgatory, which is why no parents can be seen, aside from vague mentions and shadows in the show. This also explains why it's extremely difficult to not only pinpoint what year the characters are living in, but why the focus of the show rarely leaves the street the children grew up on. However, probably the most convincing argument for this theory comes from the noticeable differences between the characters themselves. As previously stated, the cast was diverse, so much so that many pointed out that the children might not even originate from the same time period. The eccentric Rolf likely comes from the early 1900s, as he is shown to have little interest in technology and mainly only tends to his animals. Eddy, on the other hand, lived during the Great Depression. This explains his obsession with money and knowledge of swindling, as he knows what it's like growing up poor in his previous life. The main love interest of many of the male characters, Naz, fits the bill of a flower child who grew up in the 1960s. This would explain her easy-go lifestyle and somewhat flirtatious nature. The fans even theorized on how the characters or their parents might have died, and how that influences their behavior in purgatory. Kevin grew up with an abusive father who might have killed him in a drunken rage. This is why after his death, Kevin reimagines his father as overly caring and with deep pockets so that he can shower him in gifts. Ed and Sarah's father likely died in World War II, which made their mother unstable and forced the siblings to find a way to cope with life. Sarah did this by maturing early and becoming bossy and overbearing in order to replace their mother, while Ed simply shut off reality and immersed himself in sci-fi movies and video games. Lastly, the sharpest among the trio, Ed grew up to a very strict and academic family who pushed him towards science and a bright future. They were very distant, however, only leaving sticky notes for their son, as they rarely spent any time with him. It is even speculated that Ed died during a science experiment, which burned off his hair, causing him to be inseparable with his hat in the afterlife. Now you might be thinking, that still doesn't explain the tongues. The cankers have terrorized the children of the cul-de-sac from the very beginning, almost like demons. And it just so happens that they are the only characters with normal pink tongues. Some say they might be demons torturing the dead. What do you think about this theory? Was the cartoon actually dealing with heavy topics such as death, abuse, and trauma? Or were we supposed to be in a state of suspended disbelief? Let us know in the comments below.